Before we start today's video, we want to bring you a word from our amazing sponsor, BetterHelp. I always thought that this was one of the hardest times of the year. Christmas is usually very stressful, and New Year's Eve is often a letdown, and at times, very lonely. Then, where I live, I have to deal with the rest of winter. But it's never a nice, picturesque winter where it's bright and snowy. We usually only see the sun once a week at most, or at least it feels like that. If I could describe this time of the year in one word, it would be miserable. Or at least it was miserable. Then a few years ago, I started seeing a therapist. So while I can't change the weather, I have learned to deal with my depression and anxiety during this difficult time. I've been given exercises to do, like writing out all my thoughts. But a lot of the time, I just feel better after talking to my therapist. What talking to a therapist has taught me is that you do not have to feel sad, depressed, anxious, or miserable all the time. So why not check out today's sponsor, BetterHelp? You can check them out at betterhelp.com/criminallylisted. Over 4 million people have used their licensed therapists for a healthier, happier life. One thing that may be holding you back from seeing a therapist is that you're limited to the therapists in your area. But BetterHelp has you covered because they have a network of over 30,000 therapists, so they have a wide array of experts. Also, for some people, it's anxiety-inducing to go to a therapist and talk face-to-face. Again, this isn't a problem with BetterHelp. You can connect with your therapist wherever and whenever you feel comfortable, through a phone call, as a video chat, or even via messaging if you prefer that. It's all about making you comfortable. If you're interested in feeling better and signing up for BetterHelp, the process is easy. You just fill out a questionnaire so they can assess your needs. Then, in most cases, you'll be connected to a licensed therapist within 48 hours, and they will listen to you and then provide you with helpful, unbiased advice. But if you don't feel that the therapist you've been connected to is right for you, you can switch to a new one at no cost. A lot of people's New Year's resolution is to improve their physical health and may spend hours in the gym. Why not take some time and improve your mental health? If you think you might benefit from therapy, consider BetterHelp. Click on the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/criminallylisted. Clicking on the link helps support this channel and also gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp so you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. Number 3. Oliver Mann and Dylan Ellis. On the evening of June 13, 2008, the Boston Celtics were playing the Los Angeles Lakers in Game 2 of the NBA Finals. 25-year-old Oliver Martin and 26-year-old Dylan Ellis went to a friend's home in the Trinity Bellwood neighborhood of Toronto, Ontario to watch the game. Oliver and Dylan grew up in Toronto's Rosedale neighborhood and had been friends since the first grade. Oliver was a Concordia University graduate who worked in the financial sector. His mother said he had severe dyslexia as a child and was told he would never make it to university. 26-year-old Dylan had a degree in photography from Dawson College and he was a budding photographer. As the game ended around midnight, Oliver and Dylan left their friend's home with Oliver's 22-year-old girlfriend. They got into Dylan's parents' black Range Rover. Dylan was going to drive them home. Oliver was in the passenger seat and his girlfriend was in the back seat. It started as a pleasant drive. They laughed and talked about the night. Oliver's girlfriend took this picture at 12:05 with her smartphone. The picture captured Oliver and Dylan laughing in the car's front seat. Minutes later, their friend, Andrew Gilchrist, called Dylan. Dylan had borrowed Gilchrist's condo keys to pick up food earlier in the evening. Gilchrist needed the keys back for work the next morning. Dylan turned the SUV around and drove back to Gilchrist's condo. The trio hadn't planned on getting out of the car. Instead, one of them was going to throw the keys to their friend. At 12:08, as Dylan pulled up to the condo, music blaring in the SUV, Oliver's girlfriend recalled hearing Dylan say, "Hey," or "How's it going?" to someone outside the vehicle. The Range Rover barely stopped before a gunman shot Dylan in the chest at close range from the driver's side. The shooter fired a second shot, which struck the passenger's side. Oliver yelled to his girlfriend to get down. The gunman fired another shot through the windshield, hitting Oliver in the chest. The gunman then fled. Dylan and Oliver's friend, Andrew Gilchrist, rushed from the condo when he heard the shots. He attempted to administer first aid to both men as Oliver's girlfriend called 911. 25-year-old Oliver Martin and 26-year-old Dylan Ellis died shortly after arriving at the hospital. The Toronto Homicide Unit started its investigation with little to go on. They set up a tent to process the scene because it started raining. They examined security footage from co-op buildings surrounding the condo, but if they found anything of interest, they did not make that news public. A big problem was that the investigators could find no motive for the killing. Neither Dylan nor Oliver had any ties to gangs or drugs, nor did they have problems with anyone. The shooter fired the shots about half a foot to 2 feet away, so the police thought it was unlikely it was a case of mistaken identity. They also doubted it was a carjacking because a carjacker probably wouldn't have fired a gun, which would have attracted unwanted attention. The police didn't think that the shooting had been pre-planned because they unexpectedly returned to the condo. One theory is that it was a road rage incident. Perhaps they angered a fellow motorist on their route. But no one saw another vehicle drive to the area or leave it. Instead, witnesses heard shots ring out, then they saw 2 people flee from the scene. One was on foot and the other was on a bicycle. The police initially thought that the shooter was familiar with the area. Officers responded to the shooting quickly, but the shooter and a possible accomplice got away without being spotted. Dylan and Oliver's senseless murder devastated their families. Oliver's stepfather, Alan Dudek, said, "It's been hard watching their friends get married and have kids, knowing those were things Oliver would never get to do." In 2013, Oliver's mother, Susan Martin, said, "It's like living in a horror movie, for me anyway. I have this childlike belief that it's all just a horror movie, and it will end, and Oliver will have his life. That's how I keep living." On September 24, 2008, the victims' mothers, Karen Ellis and Susan Martin, spoke to the press at the police headquarters. The grieving mothers offered a $50,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest of their son's killer. They pleaded with the federal government to ban handguns. A year later, Toronto Homicide Unit Detective Sergeant Gary Giroux released a photo of Dylan and Oliver laughing before their murders, hoping it would trigger new information on the case. Oliver and Dylan's families have done their best to move on and keep hope alive. In 2010, the families planted a red oak tree and installed a bench in Ramsden Park with their sons' names. They also held annual memorials. 4 years after the murders, tragedy struck again. On June 13, 2014, Andrew Gilchrist died of an apparent overdose. Gilchrist's death was exactly 6 years after his friend's murders. He was 31 years old. Despite the pain of each family and a killer still on the loose, Detective Sergeant Gary Giroux did his best to find the killer. "As long as I'm still here, it's not a cold case," Giroux told the press in 2018. He eventually retired and passed the case on to a new generation of detectives. As of January 2024, the murders of Dylan Ellis and Oliver Martin have not been solved. Number 2. Bart Whitaker. In December 2010, the Whitaker family was living a seemingly idyllic upper-middle-class life in the Sugar Land area, a suburb near Houston, Texas. They fell in love, married, and had 2 sons, Thomas Bartlett, who went by Bart, and Kevin Michael. Bart was born in 1979 and Kevin in 1983. Kent was an accountant and comptroller for a family-run construction business. Patricia, who went by the name Tricia, was an elementary school teacher, but she quit to raise her sons. The couple's oldest son, Bart, was quick-witted and did well in school. He loved cycling, a passion he shared with his father. For the most part, Bart was well-behaved, but he did occasionally get into trouble. When Bart was a teenager, he and a friend were arrested for trying to steal computers from their high school. Kevin was considered a good kid. He played baseball and ran track. At school, he was elected to the student council as junior class president. The neighbor kids thought that the Whitakers had the cool house in the neighborhood. Many of the kids considered Kent and Tricia to be secondary parents. On December 10, 2003, 23-year-old Bart called his parents and told them he had graduated from college. Of course, Kent and Tricia were proud of their oldest child, so that night they arranged a dinner at a restaurant for the family. During the dinner, Bart's family presented him with a Rolex watch. It was something he had wanted. The family had a nice meal together and several photos were taken. Like this one, where Tricia posed for the photo with her sons. Kevin is on the left and Bart is on the right. When the family arrived home, Bart said he left his cell phone in the car. As the rest of the family entered the house, a man in a ski mask, armed with a gun, ambushed them. Bart then went into the house and he was shot as well. Tricia and Kevin were shot in the chest. Kent was hit in the shoulder, shattering his humerus bone. Bart took a bullet to the shoulder. A neighbor was the first to arrive on the scene. They found Tricia barely breathing. The neighbor asked Tricia what happened. "He shot us," she said. If she recognized the shooter, she did not identify him. The neighbor found 19-year-old Kevin, who was already dead. Bart called 911, telling the dispatcher he chased the shooter out of the house. Kent, Tricia, and Bart were all rushed to the hospital. 51-year-old Tricia died shortly after arrival. Kent and Bart both survived their wounds. After the murder of his wife and youngest son, Kent was conflicted. He wanted the killer to be caught and brought to justice. But he was also deeply disturbed because he suspected that Bart may have set up the shooting. During their time in the hospital, Kent and Bart spent a lot of time reading the Bible and discussing their faith. Kent didn't reveal his suspicions to his son or the police. He decided forgiveness was the best route to healing. It took the police about a week to suspect that Bart might be behind the shooting. The police found the murder weapon at the scene. The gun was registered to Kevin Whitaker. It had been in a gun safe, but the safe had been pried open. Investigators noticed that the shooter neatly opened the drawer where the gun was stashed, but none of the family's valuables were touched. The police questioned Bart. He told them he had graduated from Sam Houston State University in Huntsville, Texas. The police contacted the school and they learned that Bart had lied. He had not graduated. Reports vary regarding his academic status. Some outlets say he was a freshman on academic probation, while others say he completely dropped out. Regardless, he had not completed school like he told his family, which resulted in the dinner out, and that's when the gunman broke into the house. This was all a shock to Kent. He and Tricia had been paying Bart's tuition and his rent. In the summer of 2004, Detective Marshall Slott met a stranger who dropped a bigger bombshell. In a darkened parking lot, this informant told Slott that Bart Whitaker had planned the shooting. The person was Adam Hipp, an old friend of Bart Whitaker. According to Hipp, Bart approached him with an identical plan to kill his family a few years earlier. Hipp spoke to the police for about 3 hours, drawing a diagram of the house and saying that Bart wanted to be shot to take suspicion off of him. The police decided it was time to question Bart again. When they interrogated Bart, they noticed that some information was oddly vague when he talked about the details of the shooting. The police thought that Bart was never confident with his answers. Detective Slott shifted his attention to two of Bart's closest friends, Chris Bashir and Stephen Champagne. Bashir and Champagne worked with Bart at a country club months before the shooting. Detective Slott asked the men to provide blood samples for a sniff sample. A sniff sample is when police dogs sniff blood samples to see if there is a matching scent on the evidence or at crime scenes. The dog sniffed Bashir's sample and matched it to the gun and the drawer that had been moved the night of the murders. Bart realized that the police were onto him, so he decided to run. One day, he told his father he was going to the country club. Then, he disappeared. With Bart gone, the police put a lot of pressure on Champagne and repeatedly questioned him. Champagne eventually cracked and told the police that Bashir was the shooter and Bart was the mastermind. Champagne led the police to the Lake Monroe Bridge, where he and Bashir ditched the evidence. Divers collected a stash of evidence. Underwater, the police found a sack. In the sack was the same ammunition used in the gun, a chisel for prying open the safe, and phones used to plan the attack. The sack also contained water bottles with Champagne and Bashir's DNA on the cap. In September 2005, the police arrested Champagne and Bashir for the murders of Tricia and Kevin Whitaker. At the time, Bart Whitaker was still missing. 14 months after he went missing, a man named Rudy Rios called the police. He was a former co-worker of Bart. He heard there was a $10,000 reward for information that led to Bart's arrest. He knew where Bart was. Bart had paid him $3,000 to take him to Sarajevo, Mexico, where some of Rios' family lived. Bart had $7,000 on him that he stole from his father, whom he had tried to murder. Bart then assumed Rios' identity. In Sarajevo, Bart quickly adapted to his new community, even though he couldn't speak Spanish. He even started dating a local girl named Cindy Lou. Cindy Lou's father, Homero, was impressed with Bart's work ethic and gave him a job at his furniture store. Bart also bonded with Cindy Lou's brother, Ubaldo. Bart lied to them and told them stories about serving in Afghanistan. He told them that's where he received his bullet wound. He told the family that his mother was a sex worker and he was essentially an orphan. Mexican authorities found Bart and sent him back to the U.S., where prosecutors were waiting with an indictment for murder. Bart's arrest devastated Cindy Lou's family. They considered Bart a part of the family. Homero said, "I truly loved him like my son, really, I swear, and it was very painful for me when I found out what he had done. It hurt very, very much." In the U.S., Bart was reunited with his father. Kent told 48 Hours, "The first time I saw him was when they took him back from Mexico. I walk in and we're separated by bulletproof glass. I said, 'Well, you look like you're okay.' And he says, 'Yes, I am.' And he says, 'Dad, I'm just so sorry. I'm so sorry for all of it. It's all my fault.'" Prosecutors wanted Bart to be executed for his crimes. Kent, a religious man who believed in forgiveness, did not want his son to get the death penalty. He said if the state pursues the death penalty and receives it, then they will kill the last surviving member of my family. During Bart Whitaker's March 2007 trial, the prosecution argued that he wanted to kill his family to get a $1.5 million inheritance. Steve Champagne testified that he waited in the car while Chris Bashir shot each family member. Bart's college roommates, Will Anthony and Justin Peter, also testified. They talked about a botched December 2000 attempt to kill the Whitakers. In this case, the men approached the house, but the house alarm scared them off. After that attempt, Bart tried again to have his family killed. He had asked Adam Hibb, the man who went to the police after the murders, and told them that he thought that Bart was behind the shooting. Hibb testified that Bart had asked him to do the hit. Amazingly, there was a third failed attempt on the Whitakers' lives. This time, one of Bart's friends found out and called the police, who notified his parents. Bart told his parents it was a misunderstanding, and they had believed him. The trial lasted 6 days. After 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found Bart Whitaker guilty of capital murder. They believed he was a continuing threat to society, which warranted the death penalty. During the sentencing phase, Bart took responsibility for murdering his mother and brother and trying to kill his father. He said, "I am 100% guilty for this. I put the plan in motion. If I had not done so, it would not have happened." Kent Whitaker pleaded with the judge not to sentence his only living son to death, but the judge ignored his plea and sentenced Bart to death. Over the next several years, Bart exhausted his appeals. In 2007, Bashir, the gunman, pleaded guilty and received life with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Champagne got 15 years in exchange for testifying against Bart and Bashir. In a 2014 interview with ABC, Bart said he killed his family because he felt inadequate and didn't believe his parents loved him. Bart's execution was scheduled for February 22, 2018. Kent, who had since remarried, pleaded with the parole board for clemency. Kent pointed out that Bart was a model inmate. Other inmates even wrote letters of support for Bart. These inmates praised Bart for his progress in rehabilitation and his ability to keep other inmates calm. Bart needed to convince the 7-member panel to make a recommendation to the governor. In the end, they unanimously voted in favor of the recommendation. With the recommendation, it was up to Governor Greg Abbott to weigh in. Yet, he was quiet on the matter. On February 22, 2018, 38-year-old Bart ate his last meal, chicken enchiladas, rice, beans, and vegetables. He said goodbye to his father. He was scheduled to die by lethal injection at 6 p.m. But within an hour of his execution, Governor Abbott called to stop the execution in exchange for Bart's right to parole. Ken and his wife were in the hospitality room when they found this out. They could only cheer and cry, knowing Ken's son's life was spared. Bart's clemency was the first one in Texas in 11 years. Though his life was spared, Bart will have to spend the rest of his life in prison. Kent and his wife Tanya regularly visit Bart in prison. Ken wrote a book about the power of forgiveness called Murder by Family, the incredible true story of a son's treachery and a father's forgiveness. He tours the country speaking about the power of forgiveness. In 2019, Bart made headlines again, this time for writing his own book. The book, Who Fears Hell Runs Towards It, on the Christian metaphysical foundations of the American penitentiary and the missing image of resistance in Foucault's Discipline and Punish, was sold on Amazon. In the book, Bart talks about his experiences in prison. Prison officials have tried to shut it down, worried that he'd make money off of it. The book is currently out of print. At the time of this video, 43-year-old Bart Whitaker is incarcerated at the William G. McConnell Unit in Beeville, Texas. Number 1. Eli Stutzman. Eli Stutzman was born on September 30th, 1950, and grew up in an Amish community in Ohio. He was the son of an Amish bishop and the fourth of 13 children. As a child, Eli loved being the center of attention. One of his cousins said that he could act like he was better than everyone else. School friends knew him to break the rules, but never took responsibility for his actions. By the time he was 6 or 7, he was a habitual liar. All this led to near constant friction with his father. Eli was 16 when he met Ida Gingrich. They became a couple and dated for 4 years, eventually marrying. When Eli was about 21, even though he only had an 8th grade education, he became one of the school's teachers. In adulthood, Eli still had a rebellious streak and was still at odds with his father. Eli's father got involved with school matters when Eli asked the school for a raise. His father thought he wanted more money to make it easier for him to leave the Amish community. One day while working on a farm, Eli had a stress-induced mental breakdown. So Eli's father had him committed to a psychiatric hospital. In 1972, tensions increased so much that Eli left the community. He stayed with his wife Ida because Amish tradition frowned on divorce. The couple had their first son, Danny, in 1976. In late 1976, Ida became pregnant with the couple's second child. On July 12, 1977, Ida, who was 8 months pregnant, supposedly had a heart attack while rescuing milk cans from the family barn as it burned down. Ida was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital. The baby could not be saved. Eli told the police that he had found her unconscious and tried to revive her, but wasn't able to. He told the police that she had a weak heart and smoke probably killed her. The police ruled the death an accident, and the official cause of death was heart-stopped. Community members suspected that Eli was behind Ida's death. However, it was a protective community, so no one said anything to the police. The attending doctor specialized in treating the Amish and believed Eli's story. The police, on the other hand, felt that the autopsy wasn't thorough enough because Ida was an Amish woman. The police even came up with a motive for why Eli wanted to kill his wife. They discovered he had been placing classified ads in gay magazines looking for companionship. The police thought that Eli Stutzman wanted his wife out of his life because he was secretly a gay man who wanted to be with other gay men. Ida was Eli's last connection to the Amish community. After her death, he completely cut himself off from the community. He patched electricity into his house and lived there for a few more years. In 1982, Eli and his son left Ohio. The father and son lived a nomadic lifestyle in various states. Eli revealed that he was gay to his son. He brought Danny to gay parties and had sex with men while Danny was asleep in another room. By the mid-1980s, the father and son had settled in Austin, Texas. In mid-1985, Eli owned and operated a remodeling business. He shared an apartment with one of his employees, 23-year-old Glenn Pritchett. On May 12, 1985, police found Pritchett's body in a ditch in Travis County, Texas. He had been shot once in the head. The police questioned Eli, who claimed the last time he saw Pritchett was 2 months earlier. Eli said that Pritchett had gone to visit family in Montana. Soon after Pritchett's murder, Eli and Danny left Texas. In July 1985, Eli left Danny with a couple he knew in Lyman, Wyoming. Over the next few months, Eli settled into a ranch in Aztec, New Mexico. Durango, Colorado is about 36 miles north of Aztec. While Eli was living in Aztec, 2 men were murdered in Durango. 36-year-old David Taylor was the co-owner of the automatic transmission exchange in Durango. On November 10th, a train passenger saw Tyler's decaying body outside his business. The police determined he had died of a severe head injury. 3 weeks later, on December 5th, 1985, 24-year-old Dennis Slater was working as a cashier at Junction Creek Liquors in Durango. He was killed after he was shot at close range in the back. During their investigation, the police discovered that Eli Stutzman and David Tyler both took drugs and were part of the gay community. There's even evidence that they both attended the same party on November 8, 1985, 2 days before his body was found. It's unknown if Eli and Dennis Slater knew each other, but Slater was an acquaintance of Tyler. The investigation didn't go much further, and the cases went cold. In December 1985, Eli Stutzman picked up 9-year-old Danny in Wyoming on his way to Ohio. During the visit, friends took a picture of the father and son. In the photo, Eli is standing close to his son, both smiling in front of a Christmas tree. This photo was the last taken of the two. On December 24, 1985, a truck stop manager noticed something as he drove down a country road near Chester, Nebraska. He stopped his truck to investigate. Initially thought that someone had left a mannequin in the ditch as a sick prank. But when he looked closer, he saw that it was the frozen body of a boy with his hand over his heart. He stayed far enough away not to disturb the scene and radioed for help from his truck. The sheriff arrived on the scene and blocked off the road. How the body of the boy ended up in the ditch was a mystery to the police. No tire prints were left at the scene. Initially, the police thought it was a girl who might have wandered off, but the feet on the sleeper were still clean. They didn't figure out it was a boy until the autopsy. It was clear that the body was left there intentionally. However, the medical examiners could not determine his cause of death. There was markings around the neck, but they thought it could have been from the cold. Authorities speculated that the boy died of Reye syndrome, a disease associated with giving aspirin to small children and teens. The town of Chester rallied behind the deceased child and adopted him as one of their own. He was given the nickname Little Boy Blue based on the blue sleeper he wore. Residents donated a burial plot, headstone, and a suit for him. His headstone reads, Little Boy, Abandoned, found near Chester, Nebraska, December 24, 1985. A space for his name was left for when he was eventually identified. The town named him Matthew, which has origins in Hebrew. It means gift from God. 500 residents attended the funeral service. Police sent off sketches of the boy to the press. The story became national news, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children provided guidance. Meanwhile, in Ohio, family members asked Eli about Danny. Eli told them he stayed in Wyoming for a ski trip. The family found it strange that Eli and his son didn't celebrate Christmas together, but Eli stuck to his story. For over 2 years, Eli's friends and family continued to ask about Danny. He told his friends in Wyoming that Danny was enrolled in school in Ohio. He even showed them letters that Danny supposedly wrote. He told Danny's maternal grandparents something completely different. He said that in 1986, he died in a car accident in Utah. Little Boy Blue's identity remained a mystery for almost 2 years until a 1987 Reader's Digest article profiled the mystery child. One of the readers recognized the sketch. It was Danny Sutzman. They knew Danny from when they took care of him in Wyoming. They alerted the police to let them know the boy's real identity. This led the police to search for Eli Stutzman. They got a tip that Eli was living in a trailer in Hazel, Texas. On December 14, 1987, 2 years after the body was found, the police arrested Eli. He did not fight extradition back to Nebraska. According to Eli, 9-year-old Danny had a respiratory condition. He said he tried to wake him up, but he couldn't. Eli said he feared people would blame him for not caring for Danny. Unsure what to do, Eli sat with his son's body, praying over him for hours. He then took Danny, who was only wearing a blue sleeper, and left him in the ditch. Eli buried him in snow before taking off. Eli later said, I decided to leave him and let God take care of him. The temperature was below 30 degrees Fahrenheit that day. Eli Stutzman pleaded guilty to the misdemeanor crimes of abandoning a body and concealing a death. Prosecutors theorized that Eli killed Danny, but they couldn't prove it in court. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison. After hearing about Eli's arrest and conviction, the authorities decided to reopen Glenn Pritchett's murder case. They concluded that they had enough evidence to charge Eli for the murder of Pritchett. After completing his 18-month sentence, the police arrested Eli and sent him to Austin to stand trial for Glenn Pritchett's murder. On July 31, 1989, Eli was found guilty. He was sentenced to 40 years of prison. In prison, Eli sent letters and sculptures to his family. He also updated them on his life in prison. While in prison, he was diagnosed as HIV positive. He was released in 2002 after serving about 13 years in prison. He then settled in Fort Worth, Texas. For the next 5 years, he lived quietly in an apartment. He made and sold leather goods from his apartment. He associated with drug dealers and sex workers, but didn't tell many people about his past. On January 31, 2007, a friend found 56-year-old Eli Stutzman dead in his apartment. He was on a couch with a comforter pulled up to his neck. His friend said he looked peaceful. The medical examiner's office concluded he died by suicide by a sharp force injury to his left arm. It's believed they cut his arm, walked to the couch, and laid down to watch TV until he died. He was 56 years old. Eli did not leave a suicide note. Toxicology testing indicated that there was cocaine in his system. His family never claimed his body. Eli Stutzman's death leaves many mysteries. Even though he was never charged, it's believed he is responsible for the murders of 36-year-old David Tyler and 24-year-old Dennis Slater in Durango, Colorado. It's also believed that he murdered his 26-year-old wife, Ida, who was 8 months pregnant at the time of her death. After Eli's death, the police in Durango requested Eli's fingerprints and DNA. However, it did not match any evidence from either crime. As of early 2024, Greg Olson, a reporter who wrote about the case, is still digging for answers. His book, Abandoned Prayers, was published in 1990, with a second edition coming out in 2003. He set up justiceforida.com, a site dedicated to finding information on Ida Stutzman's death. He hopes to find all the answers surrounding the complicated life of Eli Stutzman. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please don't forget to check out our new channel, Paranormally Listed. There's a link on the screen now, and there's a link in the description box below this video. Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.